everyone, my name is Amber, welcome back to my channel. This is my August wrap up. I had a brilliant month in August. I was much less stressed than I had been in previous months because I didn't have as much going on. We did have a wedding to look forward to at the end of the month, but apart from that we had no plans at all. So that meant that I got to do a lot of reading and I managed to read a humongous 16 books, almost 18, but not quite. Obviously I want to tell you about them. I'm going to start with the physical books that I read because they're right here with me, and then I'll talk about the audio and ebooks so that I don't have to do too much editing going back and forth because I really hate editing videos. So I'm going to start off with the two rereads that I had this month. I think there were only two of them. There could have been some ebooks, but I don't think so. First of all, I read Homegoing, which again I gave 5 stars. I love this book so much. It's a generational story, which is one of my favourite storytelling techniques. It follows two sisters in the first couple of chapters. They're from the continent of Africa in the area that will become Ghana in the future. It's set first of all in the 1700s, and one of the sisters is sold into slavery and the other sister becomes a slave trader's wife, and the book continues to follow their descendants through the generations, and it talks about how they're still interconnected and generational trauma. It's truly intense and heartbreaking, and I love this book so much. There's only one chapter in this book that I didn't look forward to because I didn't like it in my first read of the book and I didn't love it in my reread either, but as a book as a whole it's a 5-star read. It's absolutely incredible, and if you like historical fiction or literary fiction I would highly recommend this one. It's so good, and I'm so glad that I read it again this month. I also reread Mina and the Undead. You probably saw or maybe saw my reading vlog for this one. I rated this one higher than I did when I first read it, so I gave it 4 stars this time around. It's about a girl called Mina who has gone to stay with her sister in New Orleans, Louisiana. It's set in the 90s, which is a very important part of the plot. Mina and her sister go to work at a haunted house. I don't know loads about New Orleans, but I know it's got kind of like a paranormal vampire witchy vibe going on in real life and also in this book. So paranormal stuff comes into play. There are some murders happening in New Orleans as well, and so the sisters get involved in the supernatural killings or solving supernatural killings. They're not really involved. Yeah, I really like this one. It's really fast paced and I'm looking forward to finishing the sequel. I'm in the middle of it, but I haven't managed to finish it in August yet. I would highly recommend this one if you like paranormal YA, and this one's a little bit different because it is set in the 90s, which is a massive throwback to us 90s babies. I read 2 more 5-star reads this month in August because I don't know what happened. I was just on a roll. It was absolutely an incredible month for reading. Those 2 books were both by the same author and they have very similar vibes as well, and that was The Last Bear and The Lost Whale. So The Last Bear is Hannah Gould's debut. It won the Waterstones Prize. You've probably heard of it. It's a middle grade book, both of them are. And this is about a girl who goes to an island in the Arctic for her dad's work, and she comes across a polar bear who is the only one left on the island. He's there because he is injured. She befriends the bear and wants to get him back to his family, or to other polar bears, I guess. It's honestly the cutest, most heartbreaking story, and it also addresses environmentalism and climate change and how important it is that we as people do even just little things if we can to try to help the planet. The basic message of it is no matter how small you are or insignificant you think you are, you can still help in some way. So it really spoke to me. I loved it, and there are also illustrations throughout and they're absolutely stunning. So 5 stars for that one. Like I said, I also gave 5 stars to The Lost Whale, which is Hannah Gould's newest book. It came out this year. Again, this one is illustrated. This is about a boy who has to go to stay in California with his nan, who he hasn't really met before, I don't think, because his mother is dealing with some mental health issues. And so he goes to California where his mum grew up, and he starts to feel more of a connection to her through that and through watching the whales from his bedroom window. He notices one day that a whale goes missing or hasn't been seen in ages along the coast because the whales travel from north to south along the coast, and whale watchers kind of spot them and track them, and this whale hasn't been seen in a while, so he wants to go and find this whale. This is a truly magical story. There are hints of magical realism in here. There were in The Last Bear as well. I absolutely love this book. I have no complaints. I cried over both of these books. I think Hannah Gould is so talented. The person who is illustrating this also absolutely wonderful. I think they're both illustrated by the same person. Yeah, Levi Pinfold, who I'm going to have to look up. Also, this copy is signed and stamped, which is wonderful. Is this copy as well? It's not. So yeah, 5 stars for both of those. They were brilliant. I then had a 3-star read, which wasn't bad. 3 stars means that I really liked the book. It just wasn't excellent excellent and it wasn't an all-time favourite. So I read the Marlow Murder Club, which is a book that I bought this year. This is set in a town called Marlow, which is quite close to me. I'm very familiar with it because we used to go when I was younger, and it's kind of similar to the Thursday Murder Club in that it's about a bunch of old people who try to solve a case or solve murders, and they get far too involved. If this happened in real life, they would probably be arrested, but who knows, because they're old. And so they're trying to solve a murder of a neighbour in Marlow. I did really truly enjoy this, and I'm looking forward to recapping it and then reading the sequel, which I think is coming out next year. I'm not sure exactly when, but I am definitely interested in the sequel, whereas with the Thursday Murder Club, I didn't enjoy that one at all. I gave that 1 star and I gave this 3. So this is definitely the better book in my opinion, and it's a shame that it's not as popular because it's better. I also read Those Summer Nights, which I won in a giveaway from the author. I was in the mood for it because it's a summary YA book. So this is about a Jewish girl who previously was sent away for bad behaviour to a boarding school, and she comes back, and in order to kind of prove that she is growing up and maturing and getting better, she has to get a job, and she does so at this sort of bowling alley adventure park sort of thing, and it's about her getting to know everyone there and them all becoming a family. So it's like found family vibes. It's a really, really cute book, and I think I gave it like 4 stars. I honestly have no complaints about this one. It's just not an all-time favourite. I flew through it, I read it in like a day, and I just love the themes of family and friendship, and the romance was also quite cute, so there was that. Then finally I read Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. This one took me ages to actually pick up. I bought it, I think I bought it last year. I hadn't really felt the need to pick it up, and then I wanted to pick it up before the show came out, which I did manage, thankfully, and I was going to do a video on the book versus the show, but the show actually covers the section of the book that I wasn't all that interested in, so I'm not sure I want to do that. This is basically, it's written as a very factual non-fiction novel about the Targaryen line. So if you're not familiar with the show, you probably have heard of Daenerys Targaryen, the blonde one. She's got like silvery blonde hair. It's about her family history, and it takes place I think 300 years before Game of Thrones. I really loved the first half of this book. For those familiar, let me just read out the names because I can't remember all of them, they're all the same. I really enjoyed this all the way up to Balon, Jaehaerys and Balon, like their sort of area, so all the way up to the Dance of Dragons, because I really liked the way that the kings and rulers were a little bit different to what they were like in Game of Thrones. They were actually quite good for royals in my opinion, apart from all the like incest and weirdness. Yeah, I just found it really interesting. I really enjoyed getting to know all of those characters. But then during the Dance of Dragons chapters, when the Targaryens start fighting each other, I didn't love it as much because I felt like I was being dragged from place to place and from scene to scene, and it just didn't really feel all that well presented to me. Another thing I really didn't like was how repetitive it felt, because at the beginning of each new chapter, or almost every new chapter, it felt like the author was reintroducing family members who we had met before and who we followed before. So we already knew who they were, and then George R.R. Martin felt the need to describe them again, tell us who they are and how they fit into the family tree. And I suppose it did help me sort of remember what was going on, because this family tree is like really messy because everyone's related. But it just felt kind of unnecessary. I read this book quite quickly, and so it did become very repetitive, and I didn't need to be retold things that I already knew. So yeah, it's a shame I didn't enjoy the section that the show is covering, but I am really enjoying the show, so there's that. I just didn't love this book, and I'm gonna give it 3 stars, and I'm gonna unhaul it because I don't want to read or keep George R.R. Martin's books because he annoys me as a person. I might still read the sequel though. I also read Into the Jungle, which is a book by Erica Ferencik. She wrote The River at Night, which I read quite recently as well, and I thought this book was going to be really good because I thought it was going to be like an adventure book in the Bolivian jungle, but that's not the case. It's a very strange book, and it's also very boring, and I do wonder like what was the point of this. So I gave this one 2 stars. It's a real shame because I thought I was going to love it, and it was again going to be an adventure survival story, but instead it's kind of set in a small village within the Bolivian jungle, and the main character, who is white I think, comes into the village and starts sort of questioning their lifestyle. Yeah, I didn't like it, so gave it 2 stars. I'll be unhauling it, and also her other book, and I might pick up her 3rd book, which I think is set in Greenland or off the coast of Greenland, but I will try to get that as an ebook or something when it's cheap rather than buying a physical version. I read This Mortal Coil, which is a YA sci-fi book. It deals with like genetics and DNA. In this world there is a virus which is literally turning people into zombies who explode, and the main character's father is kind of the key to figuring out the cure for this virus. So he gets taken away, and the main character is left to fend for herself, and then she is told by a soldier that her father is actually dead, so she needs to come and help because she knows some stuff about genetics as well. I liked this one, but I didn't love it, so I think I gave it 3.5 stars. I did receive this one from NetGalley years ago and I just never picked it up, and now I have picked it up. I don't want to continue with the series. I found the genetic stuff really interesting. The story was sort of meandering and it felt like very basic YA, and I've read a lot of YA action sci-fi books, and this one didn't really stand out to me apart from the genetic stuff. So I think if it had focused a little bit more on all of that, then I would have liked it more, but unfortunately I didn't love this. So yeah, I won't be continuing with the series, but I'm glad that I finally got around to it. And then for my final physical book, I read Love on the Brain, which I pre-ordered and it arrived quite quickly, thankfully. I really enjoyed this one. I do understand the critiques about people who have read all of Ali Hazelwood's books in quick succession. People keep saying they're all identical, and I have to say I read The Love Hypothesis earlier this year and it is very similar to this book, if not pretty much identical apart from some aspects. But I don't really think that's a reason to hate on this book, because I loved The Love Hypothesis, and if this had been written by any other author I would have loved this as well. And it doesn't really matter to me that her books are identical because I'm not marathoning them, and I don't really need anything unique from such a book. It's a romance book and a lot of those do tend to be the same, so yeah, I don't really care about the similarities. If I had carried on reading through her novellas and then read this one very quickly, then maybe I wouldn't have liked it as much. But yeah, I still gave this one 4 stars. The main character is your typical quirky sciencey girl, and the love interest is the broody guy who perhaps hates the main character or perhaps has hidden feelings for her. Sorry, that would have made it a lot more interesting. I found it very funny and enjoyable, so it was exactly what I wanted from it. I don't think anyone should be going into any of these books expecting a masterpiece, to be honest, but I suppose that happens when books have a lot of hype and then the follow-up books don't offer anything brand new. Anyway, I really enjoyed this one and I'm looking forward to reading her other books. I might check out her novellas, but I don't really do well with short stories, so I'm not really sure. There are also lots of cats in this book. I feel like I should mention that because that's an important thing for me. Okay, and then on to the audio and ebooks that I read. First of all, I listened to Into Thin Air as an audiobook. This one is a non-fiction account of the author's ascent up Everest, and then there was a disaster that happened up there. It's quite well known. I don't know if there's like a name for the disaster, if it's just like the Everest disaster of 1997. I did have some critiques of the book because the author spends a lot of time moaning about other people and what a poor job they did, and then doesn't really take into account things that he didn't do, and he seems to be putting the blame on everyone else but himself, whereas he agreed to go up this mountain and for it to be really dangerous. So he was in the exact same position as these people who did fuck up and also died. So not great, but I still really enjoyed it. I listened to it in like 24 hours, so I gave it 4 stars, but I do have to acknowledge that the author is maybe a bit of a dickhead, so not a fan of him necessarily. I also listened to an audiobook called At the Bottom of New Lake, and I gave this one 2.5 stars. I didn't really like it. It's meant to be part of like a climate change apocalyptic collection from Amazon. It just wasn't great. I found it very boring. I don't really understand what the point of it was. It did bring up some sort of sustainability, climate change things, but nothing new. The other books haven't done better, so didn't love this one. Gave it 2.5 stars. I listened to The Yellow Wallpaper, which I gave 4 stars. It's a very short story. I think it's only like 40 pages, or it's 40 minutes in the audiobook, I think, on 1.5 times speed. I don't know. It's a very short book, and it's basically about a woman who has been shut away by her husband. It's set in the 1800s because she is dealing with some mental health issues, and she starts seeing things in the walls, in the wallpaper. And it's one that I definitely want to re-listen to and re-analyze, because I feel like every time you read or listen to it, you're going to take something new from it. So really enjoyed it. I also read The Long Weekend, which I had as a physical book, but I took it back to the library. I gave this one 2.5 stars. It's a thriller mystery book about a group of friends who always go away on a long weekend, but the guys can't make it on the first night, so the partners, the women, go on the weekend for the first night, and then they discover a note that says the husbands are going to die. And the premise seems really good and intriguing, and it should have been really good and fast-paced, but it just wasn't. I feel like the setting of the long weekend could have been used a lot better than it was. And it wasn't really about their holiday at all, or about the conflicts between the people who have gone on holiday. It's all set outside of that weekend holiday. So yeah, I didn't love it. I gave it 2.5 stars. And to be honest, I've not really loved any of Gilly Macmillan's books, so she might be an author that I give up on now because she hasn't really impressed me, and that's a shame because I know that she's a very popular author. I also listened to I'm Glad My Mum Died, and I gave this one 4 stars. It's a memoir. You've probably seen it everywhere. I did a talk about it in my reading vlog as well, and it's about a actress or ex-actress, and she was a child star on Nickelodeon and in other things as well. And she basically had a very abusive mother who threw her into this industry and also caused her to have eating disorders. She restricted her own daughter's eating, and she was also sexually abused by her mother and also manipulated and abused by other adults in her life. And it was a very difficult read, but also very, very engaging. It's told in very short chapters, and I didn't want to stop listening to it, so I read it or listened to it really, really quickly. And it's not an all-time favorite, but if I listen to it again, maybe it could be. So I gave it 4 stars for now, and I might change my mind and rate it higher because it's a very, very good book. And finally, I read Nothing More to Tell by Karen M. McManus, which is her newest thriller book. It's a YA thriller, and I've done a full review on this book. I gave it 4 stars. It's basically about a main character who moved to a different school but then came back, and she's now really into true crime journalism, and she wants to look into the case of a teacher who died while she was at the school. And so she starts looking into it, and it's also told from the point of view of a guy who was there and found the teacher's body and how they sort of interconnect and what happened on that day. There were a lot of twists and turns. There were things coming out of the woodwork that I wasn't necessarily expecting. I really enjoyed this one. I love the true crime aspect of it as well. I love it when characters are into true crime because I am too, and it always adds a really interesting element like it did with A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Really, really enjoyed it. So I gave this one 4 stars, and I'm glad that I was finally able to enjoy another Karen M. McManus book, because her last book was kind of disappointing, and then before that The Cousins was alright but not great, so I was getting a bit worried, but I did really, really enjoy this one. So those are all the books that I read in August 2022. Let me know if you've read any of them, if you're planning to, what you thought of them, or what you think you might think of them. Leave an emoji down below if you can't think of anything else to say, and I'll speak to you all in my next video. Bye!